Okay, today's reading is part 2, chapter 2 of the way whereby a formal pact with evil is made. The method by which they profess their sacrilege through an open pact of fidelity to devils varies according to the several practices to which different witches are addicted. And to understand this, it must first be noted that there are, as was shown in the first part of this treatise, 3 kinds of witches. Namely, those who injure but cannot cure, those who cure but through some strange pact with the devil cannot injure, and those who both injure and cure. And among those who injure, one class in particular stands out, which can perform every sort of witchcraft and spell, comprehending all that all the others individually can do. Wherefore, if we describe the method of profession in their case, it will suffice all for all the other kinds. And this class is made up of those who, against every instinct of human or animal nature, are in the habit of eating and devouring the children of their own species. And this is the most powerful class of witches, who practice innumerable other harms also, for they raise hailstorms and hurtful tempests and lightnings, cause sterility in men and animals, offer to devils or otherwise kill the children whom they do not devour, but these are only the children who have not been reborn by baptism at the font, for they cannot devour those who have been baptized, nor any without God's permission. They can also, before the eyes of their parents, and when no one is in sight, throw into the water children walking by the waterside. They make horses go mad under their riders. They can transport themselves from place to place through the air, either in body or imagination. They can affect judges and magistrates so that they cannot hurt them. They can cause themselves and others to keep silence under torture. They can bring about a great trembling in the hands of horror in the minds of those who would arrest them. They can show to others occult things and certain future events by the information of devils, though this may sometimes have a natural cause. See the question whether devils can foretell the future in the second book of Sentences. They can see absent things as if they were present. They can turn the minds of men to inordinate love or hatred. They can at times strike whom they will kill with lightning, and even kill some men and animals. They can make of no effect the generative desires and even the powers of copulation, cause abortion, kill infants in the mother's womb by a mere exterior touch. They can at times bewitch men and animals with a mere look, without touching them, and cause death. They dedicate their own children to devils, and in short, as it has been said, they can cause all the plagues which other witches can only cause in part. That is, when the justice of God permits such things to be. All these things, this most powerful of all classes of witches can do, but they cannot undo them. But it is common to all of them to practice carnal copulation with devils. Therefore, if we show the method used by this chief class in their profession of their sacrilege, anyone may easily understand the method of the other classes. There were such witches lately, 30 years ago, in the district of Savoy toward the state of Béarn, as Nider tells in his Formicarius. And there are now some in the country of Lombardy, in the domains of the Duke of Austria, where the Inquisitor of Como, as we told in the former part, caused 41 witches to be burned in 1 year. And he was 55 years old, and still continues to labor in the Inquisition. Now the method of profession is twofold. One, in a solemn ceremony, like a solemn vow. The other is private and can be made to the devil at any hour alone. The first method is when witches meet together in conclave on a set day, and the devil appears to them in the assumed body of a man and urges them to keep faith with him, promising them worldly prosperity and length of life, and they recommend a novice to his acceptance. And the devil asks whether she will abjure the faith and forsake the holy Christian religion and the worship of the anomalous woman, for so they called the most beloved Virgin Mary. And never venerate the sacraments. And if he finds the novice or disciple willing, then the devil stretches out his hand, and so does the novice, and she swears with upraised hand to keep that covenant. And when this is done, the devil at once adds that this is not enough. And when the disciple asks, what more must be done, the devil demands the following oath of homage to himself: that she give herself to him, body and soul forever, and to do her utmost to bring others of both sexes into his power. He adds finally that she is to make certain unguents from the bones and limbs of children, especially those who have been baptized, by all which means she will be able to fulfill all her wishes with his help. We inquisitors had credible experience of this method in the town of Briach, in the Diocese of Basel, receiving full information from a young girl who had been converted, whose aunt had been burned in the Diocese of Strasbourg. And she added that she had become a witch by this method, in which her aunt had first tried to seduce her. For one day her aunt ordered her to go upstairs with her, and at her command to go into a room where she found 15 young men clothed in green garments, after the manner of German knights. And her aunt said to her, choose whom you wish from these young men, and I will give him to you, and he will take you for his wife. And when she said she did not wish for any of them, she was sorely beaten at last consented, and was initiated according to the aforesaid ceremony. She said that she was often transported by night with her aunt over vast distances, even from Strasbourg to Cologne. This is she who occasioned our inquiry in the first part into the question whether witches are truly and bodily transported by devils from place to place, and this was on the account of the words of the canon, which seem to imply that they are also so carried in imagination, whereas they are at times actually and bodily transported. For when she asked whether it was only in imagination and fantastically that they so rode through an illusion of devils, she answered that they did so in both ways, according to the truth, which we shall declare later, in the manner in which they are transferred from place to place. She also said that the greatest injuries were inflicted by midwives, because they were under the obligation to kill or offer to devils as many children as possible, and that she had been severely beaten by her aunt because she had opened a secret pot and found the heads of a great many children, and which more she told us, having first, as was proper, taken an oath to speak the truth. And her account of the method of professing the devil's faith undoubtedly agrees with what has been written by the most eminent Dr. John Nider, who even in our times has written very illuminatingly, and it may be especially remarked that he tells us the following, which he had from an inquisitor of the Diocese of Edua, who held many inquisitions on witches in that diocese and caused many to be burned. For he says that the inquisitor told him that in the Duchy of Lausanne, certain witches had cooked and eaten their own children, and that the following was the method in which they became initiated into such practices. The witches met together, and by their art summoned a devil in the form of a man, to whom the novice was compelled to swear to deny the Christian religion, never to adore the Eucharist, and to tread the cross underfoot whenever she could, to do so secretly. Here is another example from the same source. There was lately a general report brought to the novice Peter, the judge in Boldington, that 13 infants had been devoured in the state of Bern, and public justice exacted full vengeance on the murderers. And when Peter asked one of the captive witches in what manner they ate the children, she replies, "That is the manner of it. We set our snares chiefly for unbaptized children, and even for those who have been baptized, especially when they have not been protected by the sign of the cross and prayers." Readers, notice that at the devil's command, they take the unbaptized chiefly in order that they may not be baptized. And with our spells, we kill them in their cradles, or even when they are sleeping by their parents' side, in such a way that they afterwards are thought to have been overlain or to have died in some other natural death. Then we secretly take them from their graves and cook them in a cauldron until the whole flesh comes away from the bones, to make a soup that may easily be drunk. Of the more solid matter we make an unguent, which is of virtue to help us in our arts and pleasures in our transportation, and with the liquid we fill a flask or skin. Whoever drinks from which, with the addition of a few other ceremonies, immediately acquires much knowledge and becomes a leader of our sect. Here is another clear and distinct example. A young man and his wife, both witches, were imprisoned in Bern, and the man, shut up by himself apart from her in a separate tower, said, "If I could obtain pardon for my sins, I would willingly declare all that I know about witchcraft, for I see that I ought to die." And when he was told by the learned clerks who were there that he could obtain complete pardon if he truly repented, he joyfully resigned himself to death and laid bare the method by which he had first been infected with this heresy. "The following," he said, "is the manner in which I was seduced. It was first necessary that, on a Sunday before the consecration of holy water, the novice should enter the church with the masters, and there, in their presence, deny Christ with his faith, baptism, and the whole church. And then he must pay homage to the little master, for so, and not otherwise, do they call the devil." Here it is to be noted that this method agrees with those that have been recounted, for it is immaterial whether the devil himself is present or not when homage is offered to him, for this he does in his cunning, perceiving the temperament of a novice who might be frightened by his actual presence into retracting his vows, whereas he would be more easily persuaded to consent by those who are known to him, and therefore they call him the little master when he is absent. That enough seeming disparagement of his master, the novice may feel less fear. And then he drinks from the skin, which has been mentioned, and immediately feels within himself a knowledge of all our arts and understanding of our rites, ceremonies. And in this manner was I seduced. But I believe my wife to be so obstinate that she would rather go straight to the fire than confess the smallest part of truth. But alas, we are both guilty. And as the very young man said, so it happened in every respect. For the young man confessed and was seen to die in the greatest contrition. But his wife, though convicted by witness, would not confess any of the truth, either under torture or death itself. But when the fire had been prepared by the jailer, cursed him in the most terrible words, and so she was burned. And from these examples, their methods of initiation in solemn conclave is made clear. The other private method is variously performed. For sometimes when men and women who have been involved in some bodily or temporal affliction, the devil comes to them, in times in person, and at times speaking to them through the mouth of someone else, and he promises that if they will agree to his counsels, he will do for them whatever they wish. But he starts from small things, as he said in the first chapter, and leads gradually to the bigger things. We could mention many examples which have come to our knowledge in the Inquisition, but since the matter presents no difficulty, it can be briefly it can briefly be included with the previous matter. Wow. So that's the end of reading number 4.